Okay, one of the final things we've got to do with the coffee shop is actually save the items in the transaction, and again we can use our entity model to help us do this. So once the customer's paid and we've opened up the payment dialog, obviously we'll have an event that will tell us whether the transaction was successful or not. So it could be that they hadn't paid enough money or we wanted to cancel that transaction. So we've got the event within our code. So let's just go and take a look at that first of all. So if we scroll down to the bottom here, we can see that we have got the event handler here, so payment made, and then we've got our event here that's called payment_payment made. So basically, when the form is closed, when we know that they've paid, we get taken down to this bit just here. Okay, so we're probably going to want to give this a more meaningful name. So what I'm going to do this is just say, rename this as payment success. Okay, and what I can do is I'm just going to refactor that so that we can rename it here. So let's just copy that and paste it up at the top here, and you can see this is just a normal method name, so it just means that when that's called we've run this bit of code. So this is going to return true or false. So obviously in here we first of all need to check whether the payment was indeed successful. So we've got our custom event that we looked at in a previous video. So if e.paymentSuccess is true, so if that was successful, then obviously in here we want to save the current transaction. Okay, if it's false, we really don't want to do anything. We've got two choices. We could clear it, but I think we'll just leave it as nothing happens. So what we'll do here is begin to do the save process. Now obviously we're going to need to create a new transaction, so what I'm going to do is use my entity model. So I've got a transaction here. I'm going to call that transaction equals a new transaction item, or new transaction rather, sorry. So we've got our transaction, and then we need to put various different bits in. So our transaction needs a date and a time, so transaction dot. Now here are all of the properties inside of that, so you can see we've got transaction date, and I'm just going to use the inbuilt date time method to populate that. So let's just do that first of all. So date time, and we'll just use the .now method, so put that in. So that's going to give us the current date and the current time, so that's nice and straightforward. And then of course we need to put the items within that transaction. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through our array of products that we've chosen, and I'm going to pop those in one at a time into the transaction. So to do that, if you remember from the previous video, all of our products are in this binding list called products. So let's take a look through each of those one at a time and then add them to that transaction. So again, inside here, if the payment was a success, let's just clear a bit of that white space there. So I'm going to say for each, and we're going to look through for each TBL product in, so we'll give it a name, so product in our products list. So let's just go and find that. So here we go. So for each of the products, we're going to look at each one, and then what we're going to do is we're going to make a new transaction item for that and then pop that in the list. So I can then say transaction, which we created here, dot. You can see I've got all the various bits and pieces here, but I've got my transactions items. So what I want to do is add something to that, so dot add, and I'm going to create myself a new transaction item here. So new transaction item. And obviously I want to pass in what product to store there, so I'm just going to use this shorthand, and I'm going to say the product ID is going to be equal to the current product that we're looking at in our list, and I'm just going to select that, and I can use the dot method here, and I'm just going to put product ID. So basically we build a new transaction item passing in the product ID. So once that's done, we've now got our transaction, we've got the items now going into that transaction individually. The final thing to do is, once we've done all of that, then we just really need to save that. So that's nice and straightforward. All we need to do is use our entity that we created earlier. So we've already made an instance of this. So I'm just going to use the add to transactions, and I'm going to pass in the transaction that I've just created up there. And of course that transaction has already got all of the individual transaction items in, and the nice thing about the entity model, it'll worry about all of your primary keys, check that they're all correct, and automatically populate that for you. So once we've added that, I just like to run the save changes to make sure everything has been saved correctly, and that's it done. Now when we run our program, as soon as we get to this bit of code, we'll create the transaction, add the items, and save that to our database, so we've got a log of each transaction that has been made.